Are you working with a team that is going through a high turnover? Perhaps you are the leader of an organization that is finding it difficult to recruit people. And statistics. The data shows just in August, the data released by the U.S. Bureau of Statistics in August 2021, it shows that 3.9 million people actually voluntarily quit their jobs. What's happening? I mean, it's not only is it hard to get people these days, but it's even people are quitting. And this is not just because of the unemployment benefits being given out, but there's more to it. And a lot of times employers are struggling to figure out what can they do. Is it the monetary reason, or is it because of the culture, or is it because of something else, right? And so like the housing market right now, they say it's a seller's market. But when you look at finding employees, employers are struggling, and it's an unusual phenomenon because of COVID. There was also a lot of job cuts, yes, but at the same time, with the economy recovering, it is actually becoming harder for for employers to find quality candidates, and to not only once you find them, the more important part is to keep them, to nurture them, to help them stay with you, the investments that you're making. And data shows that, according to Gallup research as well as others, data shows that in the US, the highest employee engagement rate we had was actually in May 2020, and it was only at 38%. That means more than 62% of our workers are actually disengaged. Astonishing. I know we're not doing enough to make our workplaces conducive where our employees truly want to be involved or enthusiastic about their work. If we haven't met before, my name is Fahim Karim, and I am an employee engagement expert. What I do is I work with faith and value based companies and create a safe container where everyone gets to vocalize their opinions and their ideas. Your managers get to lead and listen. Your employees feel empowered and part of the team, and the company culture continues to grow and innovate. And sometimes I get this question like, Fahim, what do you mean by faith based companies? Well, faith based companies, an example of that is Chick fil A. For those of you who are in overseas, you may not be familiar with this brand, but it's a fast food company that does business like faith-based. Another example of a faith-based company would be Dubai Islamic Bank. So they do financing, but they do it based on based on like non-interest based loans, right? They're based on equity and risk sharing. So that's an example of a faith-based. What's an example of a value-based? That's another question I get. A value-based company example of that is IKEA. They make amazing products that benefit humanity, and that people would love to have. The other example would be like John Hopkins. They provide tremendous value for their patients, whether domestic or international. So that's one of the questions I usually get for faith and value based. And as someone who's worked in the corporate space for more than 22 years in one of the largest financial institutions, I've had the opportunity to really hone in on working with teams that are cross functional across the globe, and how to make collaboration happen and be the catalyst that actually brings ideas and engagement with the teams that I'm working with. And so, if you're dialing in live, if you're watching us live, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you signing in from? Where are you watching this from? And what are some of the challenges you're finding in your organization, or some of the things you're seeing a good example of employee engagement in your organization? I'd love to hear from you. So this week, one of the topics that I talked about is how to empower your teams. And this is something really important when it comes to employee engagement. And it's not just me saying this. According to Harvard Business Review, as well as a consulting firm called Great Place to Work, their research shows that when companies focus on empowering their employees, the employees actually trust the employer. And it starts with the leader. It starts with the manager that they're working for. So let me give you some of the numbers that I spoke about. So the research from Great Place to Work shows that when the employees feel they trust you, right, it's then the stock market returns that are 2 or 3 times higher than the market average. So for that organization, when you have employees that trust you and so they feel empowered, then your stock market returns are going to be 2 or 3 times higher than your market average. Isn't that something you'd love to have? Number two, you will have turnover rates that are 50% less than industry competitors. Why is this turnover number so important? Imagine, let's say you hire someone and in the first year as a sales guy, let's say the first year, let's say yeah, let's say the person is let's use a retail example. Let's say you hired a chef, and that chef is on the first year maybe is able to produce 5 dishes per day, right? And it's maybe a junior chef. Next year that chef is going to be producing chef is supposed to be producing 30 dishes or 20 dishes a day, right? So and your revenue keeps going up based on the longevity of this employee and how you nurture them. And however, on the second year, if you lost that chef, instead of having 20 dishes or 10 dishes per day, you're back to 5 dishes per day. What does that do to your revenue, right? So if those each dish is, let's say, it was a really expensive or nice or fancy restaurant, and that one dish costs $100, in the first year you're generating $500 per day from the one employee. And the second day, if you were able to retain the second year, if you're able to retain them, you would have earned double that. But instead of having that double digit, the double the revenue, when you lose an employee because of turnover, you're back to the beginner numbers, right? Even worse, there are times where the employee is not even there. Downtime of recruiting and the cost of recruiting. When you add all this up, turnover is such a pain when it comes to and how much it costs the organization, but it can be so easily avoided by focusing on simple things like what we're going to talk about today, which has to do with empowering your team. So if you're watching live, go ahead and say in the comments what are some of the things that you found was empowering for you when you worked with your manager. What are some of the practices that you saw that you felt was something that made you motivated to do more for that manager that really helped empower you? One of the data that I want to share with you that talks about the importance of empowerment comes from neuroleadership. According to David Rock, who's the founder of neuroleadership, he gives some interest and very amazing data on this. He says that when it comes to human beings and how our brains operate, one of the things that's very important to us is our status. So, and when somebody actually uplifts our status, there are certain parts, the circuitry of the brain that actually reward. This is called the reward circuitry. It actually starts to light up, just like as if somebody has received monetary reward. What's even more interesting, you may ask, what it is. It is even more interesting. It's not the similar. Actually, the reward when you actually make somebody feel their status, you uplift their status, it actually lights up more than when somebody receives a monetary reward, right? So it's really fascinating data. So what's an example of this? So an example he gives is that let's say the opposite. Let's say if you lower somebody's status, it actually creates a threat response in the brain in the subconscious level without us even realizing it. So example of this is let's say actually giving someone feedback. And sometimes when you tell somebody when they're not good at something, it actually generates a threat response, which almost, as he puts it, it's actually like somebody is feeling like they're going to be dying or something. They're feeling really threatened, and happens in the subconscious mind. So in order to offset that, rather than giving feedback, the key is to ask for feedback. So the reason I highlight this is that when you are aware that you need to make your employees feel that you are uplifting their status, you will get more engagement. They'll be more smarter because their frontal lobe, the part that needs most of the operations for making quick decisions and informed and well thought decisions, that will still be working. However, when we don't make them feel at ease, when we don't make them feel comfortable, we actually make them feel threatened, they actually become less intelligent in the process. And this is proven through neuroscience. The second data I wanted to share with you is from Professor Barbara Oakley. She is a professor of engineering in the Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan, and she's the author of the book Learning How to Learn. And not only is she an engineer, but she is somebody who researches neuroscience and the cognitive psychology. And it shows that sometimes students, because she studies the students a lot, the students think their absolute best traits are their worst traits. What's an example of that? An example of that is that memory. She gives an example of a memory. Let's say you have a poor working memory, and you may be thinking, oh, my memory is not good. I can't remember stuff. Well, actually, that's one of your strengths. It's one of your greatest strengths. How is that? Well, it turns out people who do not have able to hold things in their mind a lot, they actually are very creative. Meaning that when, if they, like for example, if you have problem with attention and you're always diverting off into some other ideas, you are often more creative because new ideas are slipping in. Right, so that's one of the things that's an amazing finding, because when you are as a leader, when you're aware of these things, that each person actually is very unique and there's something amazing about that person. So somebody else might in your across the organization, other team leaders or leaders, if they're not aware of this and they're not conscious about it, they might treat that same person like, this guy, he can't make a decision, he's slow, I mean, he just doesn't get it all the time. But when you are that leader who understands and appreciate the actual nuances of every person that's working with you, then you actually elevate their status. And by you elevating their status, you are actually getting them to be more trusting of you. And at the same time, you will get more engagement, which will result in more higher performance. Right? I also like to give an example. So she gave the doctor Barbara Oakley. She gave the example of a rider versus a hiker. Right, a fast car rider might have crossed the same distance but missed out all the details, whereas a hiker going through the forest sees all of the finer details and is able to appreciate those in great variety, and come to a better conclusion with a lot more analysis. That's the two core things that I wanted to share with you from research perspective that will help me to put together the content that I shared with this week, and there were more actually. Because of time, I'm not able to go into a lot of them. So, what are some of the practical ways to improve or to empower your team? Number one, I always love to focus on this, is learn. Learn about the team member. I'll give you an example. Simple thing. Try to understand what is this person's background. What do they value? For example, you may have a team member is taking care of her mom or her child at home. So to her, having the flexibility to work from home is big. Whereas somebody else you may have who is driven by impact. So that person being able to do big initiatives or big change, big transformations strategically, maybe is what moves them. So by learning about them is the way, one of the ways to empower them. They say that intelligence is your ability to entertain an idea or a thought without accepting it. I'll repeat. So intelligence is your ability to entertain a thought without accepting it. So by you being open to learning about new ideas or new thoughts or about your colleague, your team member that you're working with, employee that's reporting to you, sometimes you may not agree with what they have to say, or they have a different lifestyle or different way of thinking, but you, however, when you are open to listening, and hence we have two open ears, right, for all this be listening, whereas a tongue behind two prisons, the teeth and the lips. So listen more and talk less. Like they say that it's better to, it's not good to be a hippo, because the hippo has a small ear and a big mouth. And so we don't want to be hippos. So number one is learn about them. Number two, observe them in order to support them, which is O for observe. Observe them in order to support them and not micromanage them, right? What do I mean by that? So by you, whenever you're on a, maybe all your teams are on a Zoom call, try to focus on what's really different about this person today, and then follow up with a call after the meeting and say, is everything okay? Is there any way I can support you? Is there maybe something I've given you a task you're not clear on that's giving you some headache, or you're not feeling well? Tell me about it. Let's talk about that. So those are two practical tips I want to share with you quickly, and I would love to hear from you. So leave in the comments below, what are some of the things that you are seeing in your organization that you find is challenging when it comes to empowering your teams. And if you like what you heard today, and if you feel that was beneficial, why not share with somebody you know? Tag them and let them also learn and benefit from that. Until we meet next time, my friend, tread softly, speak kindly, and love unconditionally.